The sun sank low over the flat, open expanse of the Midwest, painting the sky in deep, bruised hues of orange and violet. The Monroe farmhouse sat at the end of a long, rutted dirt road, its clapboard paint peeling and its windows clouded by years of neglect. Inside, Clara Monroe, a slender 20-year-old with weary eyes and hands calloused from hard work, hunched over the kitchen table, sorting through a grim pile of overdue bills. Her mother's harsh, rattling cough echoed from the next room, a sound that had become a bitter, grim backdrop to their lives. "Clara, dear," her mother called weakly, "can you bring me some water?" Clara sprang up, quickly filling a glass from the tap before hurrying to her mother's bedside. Her mother, frail and pale, offered a weak, apologetic smile. "You need to rest, Mama. I'll figure everything out," Clara said softly, though the weight of her words felt crushingly false. The sudden sound of a luxury car pulling up outside interrupted their quiet moment. Clara glanced out the window and froze. A sleek black Cadillac rolled to a stop in front of their impoverished home, a stark, almost aggressive contrast to the rusted pickup trucks that usually frequented their neighborhood. "Who could that be?" her mother asked, her voice tinged with both curiosity and deep unease. Before Clara could respond, the car door opened and out stepped Elias Thorne, dressed in an impeccably tailored charcoal gray suit. His silver hair gleamed in the fading light. His gait was slow but purposeful, exuding an aura of immense authority and unshakable confidence. Clara stepped onto the porch, her brow furrowed in confusion as Elias approached. "Miss Monroe," Elias began, his deep voice calm yet profoundly commanding, "I have been made aware of your family's regrettable financial predicament." Clara blinked, confused. "Excuse me, who are you?" "My name is Elias Thorne. I own several properties and substantial businesses throughout this region," he explained, gesturing toward the Cadillac. "I came here with a proposal." Clara folded her arms, her guard fully up. "What kind of proposal?" Elias's gaze was unwavering. "I want you to marry me." For a moment, the world seemed to stand utterly still. "Marry you?" Clara repeated, her voice rising sharply in disbelief. "You're serious?" "Dead serious," Elias replied, his tone steady and devoid of irony. "You are a smart, capable young woman, and I have no doubt you would make an excellent companion. In return, I will ensure your family's absolute financial security. Your mother will receive the best possible medical care, and your brother Finn's education will be fully funded. It is, by any measure, a fair deal." Clara stared at him, searching desperately for any sign of humor or deceit, but his expression remained perfectly unreadable. I need time to think about this," she stammered. "Of course," Elias said with a slight proprietary nod, "but understand this. I need your answer soon. Time is a luxury neither of us can truly afford." As he returned to his car and drove away, Clara stood rooted to the porch, her mind racing in a terrified blur. Later that night, as the house finally grew quiet, Clara sat by the dim light of a kerosene lamp. Her mother's voice broke the silence. "Clara," she called from the doorway, her frail frame leaning against the wooden jamb for support. "What did that man truly want?" Clara hesitated, then relayed the audacious proposal. Her mother's eyes widened in profound shock. "That's absurd," she exclaimed, but her voice weakened quickly into a fit of painful coughs. Clara rushed to her side, helping her back into a chair. "Mama, listen," Clara said, her voice trembling with emotion. "If I do this, you'll get the care you need. Finn won't have to drop out of college. Maybe this is our only chance." Tears welled up in her mother's eyes. "I don't want you to sacrifice your life for us, my love. You deserve to find someone you love, to be truly happy." "I'm not happy now," Clara said bitterly, wiping at her own tears. "At least this way I can help. Isn't that worth it?" Her mother didn't respond, her face etched with unbearable anguish. The following days were a blur of desperate contemplation and silent prayers. The decision weighed heavily on Clara, but as she heard her mother's coughing worsen and saw the stack of insurmountable bills grow taller, she knew what she had to do. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and cold. Clara stood in front of a small dusty mirror in a borrowed bridal gown, the cheap lace scratching uncomfortably against her skin. Her hands trembled as she adjusted the veil, her reflection staring back at her with wide, fearful eyes. In the quiet room, she whispered to herself, "Am I making the biggest mistake of my life?" A gentle knock on the door startled her. It was her younger brother, Finn, his suit much too big for his lanky frame. "Clara, it's time," he said softly, his voice cracking with emotion. Clara took a deep breath, forced a brittle smile, and nodded. "Let's go." She walked out of the room toward a future entirely cloaked in uncertainty. The sprawling Thorne Manor stood atop a secluded hill in upstate New York, its towering silhouette outlined starkly against the cold gray sky. Clara stepped out of the sleek black car, her small suitcase clutched tightly in her hand. The imposing structure loomed before her, its vast windows dark and utterly uninviting. Inside, the grand foyer was as cold and unwelcoming as the exterior. Polished marble floors stretched beneath high ceilings, adorned with massive crystal chandeliers. Everything about the manor screamed excessive wealth, yet it felt utterly devoid of warmth or life. Eleanor, the longtime housekeeper, greeted Clara with a practiced, forced smile. She was a woman in her late 60s with a sharp, discerning gaze. She gestured for Clara to follow her. "This will be your room, Mrs. Thorne," Eleanor said, opening the door to a modest, though well-appointed bedroom on the second floor. It was notably plainer than the rest of the house. "Thank you, Eleanor," Clara said, forcing another smile. "And please, call me Clara." Eleanor gave her a tight, non-committal nod before turning to leave. Over her shoulder, she added, "If you need anything, the staff is here to help, but it's generally best not to ask too many questions." Clara blinked, her smile faltering. "What exactly do you mean by that?" Eleanor hesitated but offered no answer. Instead, she stepped out and quietly closed the door behind her, leaving Clara alone in a stifling silence. Over the next few days, Clara tried to settle into her new life, but the manor's vastness and eerie quiet made it nearly impossible. Elias, now her husband, was either perpetually locked away in his study or out of the house for hours at a time. Their interactions were cordial but deeply distant, as if their marriage were nothing more than a formal business arrangement. One evening, Clara finally mustered the courage to join him at dinner. The long, ornate dining table felt absurdly empty, with just the two of them, seated at opposite ends. "Do you always eat alone?" Clara asked, her voice echoing slightly in the cavernous room. "Mostly," Elias replied, not looking up from his plate. "I have a great deal of work to attend to." Clara pressed on. "And what kind of work keeps you out so late?" Elias's fork paused midair. His eyes flicked up to meet hers, cold and profoundly unreadable. "Business," he said curtly, before returning to his meal. That night, Clara lay awake in her bed, staring at the ornate ceiling. As the hours passed, a soft creaking sound broke the silence. It started faintly, like distant footsteps, then grew louder as if someone were walking deliberately down the hallway outside her room. She sat up, her heart hammering. Sliding out of bed, she tiptoed to the door and opened it just a crack. The hallway was empty, bathed in dim moonlight. The sound had stopped completely. The following day, Clara decided to explore the house. She wandered through room after room, each one grander than the last, but most were either empty or securely locked. In the west wing, she came across a door unlike the others. It was heavily reinforced with a solid brass handle and no visible keyhole. As she approached, a deep chill ran down her spine. She reached out to touch the handle, but Eleanor's voice startled her. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," the housekeeper said from directly behind her. Clara turned quickly, her hand dropping to her side. "Why is this door locked?" "It's the master's orders," Eleanor replied, her expression grave. "You'd best leave it alone." Clara frowned. "What is inside?" "That is not for you to know," Eleanor said firmly. "Let it be." That evening, Clara tried to push the strange encounter from her mind, but the sense of unease lingered like a phantom. She couldn't shake the feeling that the manor held profound secrets Elias had no intention of sharing. Late that night, she heard the low hum of a car engine outside her window. Peering out, she saw Elias stepping into a black sedan parked in the driveway. A tall man in a trench coat stood by the car, speaking with Elias in hushed, conspiratorial tones. Unable to resist, Clara grabbed her coat and slipped out of her room, keeping to the shadows as she followed. From the top of the grand staircase, she watched the two men through the large front windows. "Make sure she doesn't find out," Elias said, his voice sharp and commanding. Clara's breath caught. Was he talking about her? What was he hiding? The car pulled away into the night, leaving Clara standing alone in the darkness, her mind racing with questions she was beginning to fear the answers to. The manor was eerily silent as Clara crept through the west wing. She had been watching the forbidden door for days, waiting for the perfect moment to investigate. Tonight, for reasons she couldn't explain, it was unlocked. Her heart pounded as she stepped inside, the faint creak of the door echoing in the dark corridor. The room was dimly lit by a single, dusty chandelier. Glass shelves lined the walls, filled with old books, leather-bound documents, and framed photographs. On a large mahogany desk in the center of the room, a stack of yellowed papers sat beside an ornate fountain pen. Clara hesitated before approaching the desk, her eyes scanning the room for anything that might explain Elias's mysterious behavior. She picked up one of the photos. It showed Elias standing beside a young woman, smiling stiffly. The woman was beautiful, radiant even, and far younger than Elias. Clara flipped the photo over. Written on the back in elegant handwriting were the words, Elias and Grace, 1998. Her hands trembled as she picked up another photo, then another. Each one depicted Elias with a different young woman. The dates on the back spanned decades. The names were all different, but the chilling pattern was clear. Beside the photos were legal documents, marriage certificates, prenuptial agreements, and then, horrifically, death certificates. Clara's breath caught in her throat. The causes of death varied: accidents, sudden illnesses, even disappearances, but they all ended the same way. "What is this?" she whispered to herself, her voice barely audible. Among the papers, she noticed a worn, leather-bound journal. She flipped it open to find pages filled with Elias's neat, meticulous handwriting. The entries detailed his relationships with these women, starting with how he'd charmed them and gained their trust. The later entries turned darker, describing how he'd isolated them, controlled them, and eventually discarded them. Clara's stomach churned as she read a chilling sentence. They always think they can leave. They don't realize their tether until it's too late. A sudden noise outside the door made Clara jump. She quickly slipped the journal into her small bag and scanned the room for a place to hide. But before she could move, the door swung open. There stood Elias, his face a mask of cold, unyielding fury. "What are you doing in here?" he demanded, his voice low and dangerous. Clara clutched her bag tightly, trying to steady her voice. I got lost. I didn't mean to intrude." Elias stepped inside, closing the door behind him. His eyes bored into hers, his expression utterly unreadable. "This room is off limits," he said, his tone icy. "I made that very clear." Clara swallowed hard. "I just wanted to understand. Why are so many rooms locked? Why do you never talk about your past?" "You don't need to understand," Elias snapped. "You only need to follow the rules." Trembling, Clara mustered the courage to confront him. "What happened to them, Elias? Your previous wives? Where are they? Why are there no public records of them after they married you?" Elias's jaw tightened. "That's none of your concern. Drop this, Clara, for your own good." But Clara refused to back down. "I deserve to know the truth. Am I just another one of your projects? Someone you'll toss aside when you're done?" For a moment, Elias's face seemed to soften, as if he were about to offer an explanation. But then his cold mask returned. "You're my wife now. That's all that matters. Don't make me regret my generosity." His words sent a paralyzing shiver down Clara's spine. She realized she was in far deeper danger than she'd imagined. Elias wasn't just a controlling man with secrets. He was a meticulous predator. Feigning submission, Clara nodded. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have pried." Elias studied her for a long moment before stepping aside. "Good. Now get out of here, and stay out." Clara hurried past him, clutching her bag tightly. She could feel his eyes on her as she left the room, and her skin crawled with palpable unease. Back in her bedroom, she locked the door and sat on the edge of the bed, pulling the journal from her bag. Her hands trembled as she flipped through the pages, reading more of Elias's disturbing entries. The journal described not just the manipulation, but also the elaborate lies and cover-ups he'd used to ensure no one suspected him of foul play. One phrase stood out, written in bold letters across an entire page. They think they can escape, but they never do. Clara's chest tightened with pure terror. She knew she had to get out of the manor, but Elias was constantly watchful. The staff seemed loyal to him, and the house was surrounded by high walls and security cameras. A knock on her door startled her, and she quickly hid the journal under her pillow. "Mrs. Thorne?" Eleanor's voice called softly. "Are you all right?" "Yes," Clara replied, her voice shaking slightly. "I'm fine." Eleanor lingered for a moment before walking away. Clara waited until she was sure the house was quiet before pulling the journal out again. She began to formulate a plan, but her thoughts were interrupted by the distinct sound of slow footsteps in the hallway. They stopped just outside her door. Clara froze, holding her breath as the doorknob rattled gently. "Clara?" Elias's voice called, low and menacing. "Are you awake?" She didn't answer. The doorknob stopped moving, and after a long, agonizing pause, the footsteps retreated. Tears welled in Clara's eyes as she realized the full extent of her situation. She was trapped in a house with a man who had every intention of making her his next victim. But she wasn't going to let that happen. Clutching the journal to her chest, she whispered to herself, "I will get out of here, no matter what it takes." The atmosphere in the manor grew colder with each passing day, and Clara's unease deepened into quiet desperation. She confided in Eleanor, the housekeeper, whose kindness and silent strength had become her only source of solace. One afternoon, as Clara dried dishes in the vast kitchen, she whispered, "Eleanor, something is fundamentally wrong here. I found things in that locked room. I truly don't think I'm safe." Eleanor paused, her expression grim. She glanced around the room to ensure they were alone. "I've worked for Mr. Thorne for over 20 years, she said quietly. "I've seen things I can't explain, things I wish I hadn't seen." Clara leaned closer, her voice urgent. "Why stay? Why not leave?" Eleanor shook her head slowly. "You don't understand. He has ways of keeping people silent. I've seen staff disappear overnight for asking too many questions. But you're different, Clara. You're his wife. If anyone can get out, it's you." Clara's heart raced. "Then help me, please." Eleanor hesitated for a moment, then gave a firm nod. "I'll do what I can." Over the next few days, Clara began meticulously observing Elias's habits. She noted precisely when he left for his late-night outings and when the security cameras rotated. She memorized the guards' schedules and the layout of the sprawling estate. To maintain the illusion of compliance, she played the role of the dutiful wife. At breakfast, she smiled politely and served Elias coffee. She complimented his suits and pretended to listen attentively to his stories about business deals. Inside, every interaction felt like a profound betrayal to herself, but she knew it was the only way to buy time. One evening, while wandering the manor under the guise of getting to know her new home, Clara stumbled upon the basement door. It was slightly ajar. Curious but cautious, she slipped inside. The air was damp, and the faint, heavy smell of mildew hung in the air as she descended the creaky stairs. The dim light from her phone revealed rows of old wine barrels and dusty storage crates. Her eyes landed on a peculiar section of the stone wall, a seam barely visible, as though it concealed something. She pressed against the wall, and to her shock, it swung open with a low groan, revealing a dark, narrow passageway. That night, Clara lay awake, her thoughts racing with adrenaline. The discovery of the passageway felt like a monumental lifeline, but she knew she couldn't act impulsively. She needed a solid plan, and above all, she needed tangible proof of Elias's crimes to protect herself once she escaped. Her resolve hardened when she overheard Elias's late-night phone call. Standing just outside his study, she heard his deep voice through the crack in the door. "Transfer everything before she gets suspicious," he said, his tone clipped and urgent. "Time is running out." Clara's blood ran cold. Was he talking about her? Was he planning to liquidate his assets? Or worse, expedite her planned demise? The next morning, Eleanor approached her in the garden. "I have something to show you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. In Eleanor's room, hidden under a loose floorboard, were old letters and documents. They confirmed Clara's worst suspicions. Elias had indeed been involved in the disappearances of his previous wives. "They all tried to leave," Eleanor said, tears brimming in her eyes, "and none of them ever made it." With Eleanor's help, Clara devised her final escape plan. They agreed she would wait until Elias left for one of his late-night meetings. Eleanor would create a distraction for the remaining guards while Clara used the secret passageway to flee the estate. "I'll leave the journal with the police," Clara said. "They need to know the truth." Eleanor grasped Clara's hand. "Promise me you'll get out of here. Don't look back." Clara nodded, her steely determination finally outweighing her fear. The night arrived. Elias kissed Clara's hand at dinner, his cold smile sending a shiver down her spine. "Don't wait up for me," he said, his voice dripping with false affection. As soon as he left, Clara and Eleanor sprang into action. Eleanor feigned a hysterical argument with a guard near the front gate, drawing his attention away from the security cameras. Clutching the journal and a small bag of essentials, Clara slipped into the basement. She found the passageway and ducked inside, her heart pounding as the hidden door closed behind her. The tunnel was narrow and damp, with only faint light filtering through cracks in the ceiling. Each step felt like a gamble, the fear of being caught pressing against her like a physical weight. Suddenly, a noise echoed from behind her. Footsteps, heavy and deliberate. Clara froze, her breath hitching. She turned off her flashlight and pressed herself against the cold wall, straining to hear. The footsteps grew louder, and a familiar voice called out, "Clara, you can't run from me." It was Elias. Clara's pulse thundered as she gripped the journal tightly. "I have to keep moving," she whispered to herself, summoning every ounce of her remaining courage. She darted deeper into the tunnel, Elias's voice following her like a creeping shadow. The forest was a maze of shadows as Clara prepared for her final sprint. Her flashlight flickered, casting long, wavering shadows against the stone walls of the tunnel. As she reached the exit, a rusted metal door, it creaked loudly as she pushed it open. The sound echoed through the tunnel like a scream, spurring the men pursuing her to move faster. Emerging into the dense woods, she sprinted through the underbrush, branches scratching at her arms and face. The night was pitch black, and the only light came from the faint glow of the moon. Behind her, flashlights bobbed as Elias's men fanned out, their shouts growing closer. "She can't have gone far," one yelled. Clara's lungs burned as she pushed herself onward. She clutched the journal tightly, knowing it was her only weapon against Elias. Just as Clara's strength began to wane, she spotted headlights through the trees. A car was approaching on a nearby service road. She stumbled toward it, waving her arms frantically. "Help! Please, stop!" The car screeched to a halt, and the driver, a man in his early 30s with sharp, determined eyes, jumped out. "Are you Clara Monroe?" he asked, urgency ringing in his voice. "Yes," she gasped. "How do you know me?" "I'm Asher Vance, an investigative journalist. I've been tracking Elias Thorne for years. Get in. We don't have much time." Without hesitation, Clara climbed into the car, clutching the journal to her chest. Asher floored the gas pedal just as Elias's men burst out of the woods behind them. A black SUV roared onto the road, immediately giving chase. "Hold on," Asher said, expertly swerving to avoid a fallen branch. Clara looked over her shoulder, raw fear gripping her as the SUV gained on them. "They won't stop. They'll do whatever it takes to bring me back." "Not if we can get this to the authorities first," Asher replied, his voice steady. Suddenly, the SUV pulled alongside them, the passenger window rolling down. A man leaned out with a crowbar, aiming to smash their side mirror. "Get down!" Asher shouted. Clara ducked as the mirror shattered. Asher swerved sharply, expertly forcing the SUV to veer off the road and crash into a ditch. The forest thinned as the car sped toward the city lights. Clara's hands trembled as she opened the journal and flipped through its pages. "This is everything," she said. "Names, dates, even details about how he silenced his previous wives. It's all here." Asher nodded, glancing at her. "With this, and the information I've gathered, we can finally bring him down. But we have to act fast. He won't let this go easily." As they approached the outskirts of the city, Clara's phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. "You think you've won? This isn't over." Her blood ran cold. She showed the message to Asher, who tightened his grip on the steering wheel. "He's desperate," Asher said. "That makes him dangerous. But don't worry, we have the truth on our side." Clara nodded, a fierce determination flickering in her eyes. "Then let's end this." The day Elias Thorne was finally brought to justice was one Clara would never forget. Standing beside Asher in the courthouse, she watched as the man who once held her life in his cold, calculating grip was sentenced. The courtroom buzzed as the judge listed Elias's crimes: fraud, coercion, and proven involvement in the disappearances of multiple victims. Clara clutched the journal tightly. Its damning evidence was now an essential piece of the case. The immense weight of her perilous journey settled over her, but for the first time in months, she felt profoundly lighter. Justice had been served. The media erupted with news of Elias's arrest. Headlines labeled him a tycoon turned predator, exposing the layers of deceit and manipulation he had woven over decades. Victims' families came forward, thanking Clara and Asher for their bravery in shining a light on the truth. As part of a court settlement, Elias's estate was liquidated to fund a compensation program for his victims and their families. Clara, as one of the primary claimants, received a portion of the settlement. For Clara, the money was a lifeline. She used it to pay off her mother's medical debts and ensure her younger brother Finn could complete his college education. The relief and pride in their eyes were more valuable to her than any dollar amount. Back in her small hometown, Clara found solace in painstakingly rebuilding her life. With Asher's encouragement, she opened a community center focused on supporting women in crisis. She named it New Beginnings, a simple, powerful tribute to her own journey of survival and renewal. The center quickly became a haven for others. Clara shared her story openly, inspiring women to reclaim their lives and trust their instincts. "Your past doesn't define you," Clara would say. "Your courage to change does." As Clara dedicated herself to helping others, her bond with Asher deepened. What began as a partnership in pursuit of justice evolved into a genuine, heartfelt connection. Asher admired Clara's resilience and her ability to find light even in the darkest moments. Clara, in turn, was drawn to his unwavering support and fierce determination to right the wrongs they had uncovered. Over time, their late-night planning sessions turned into dinners filled with shared laughter, stolen glances, and shared dreams. One year after their harrowing escape, Asher invited Clara to a quiet park just outside her hometown, the same place where he had first picked her up that fateful night. As the sun set, Asher led Clara to a small bench overlooking a serene lake. With a nervous smile, he pulled a simple yet elegant ring from his pocket. "Clara," he began, his voice steady but full of emotion, "you've shown me what real courage looks like. You've taught me that even the most broken paths can lead to something beautiful. Will you let me stand by your side forever?" Tears welled in Clara's eyes as she nodded, her voice clear and steady. "Yes, but no locked doors in our house." They both laughed, the moment filled with profound relief and joy. Their wedding was a modest but heartfelt celebration, held right in Clara's hometown. The community that had rallied behind her gathered to witness her new beginning. The ceremony took place in the garden of the New Beginnings Community Center, surrounded by blooming flowers and the women whose lives Clara had touched. Clara wore a simple white dress, her smile brighter than ever as she and Asher exchanged vows. In her speech, Clara reflected on her difficult journey. "Sometimes life takes you through darkness to show you the true value of light," she said. "I wouldn't be here today without the people who believed in me, and for that, I am forever grateful. This isn't just the end of a chapter, it's the start of a whole new story." As they danced under strings of twinkling lights, Asher whispered, "You didn't just survive, Clara. You thrived. And I'm so proud to be part of your story." Clara leaned her head on his shoulder, smiling. "And I'm glad you were there to help me write it."